Hi everybody. Um, Now there's lots and lots of videos on YouTube by autistic people who oftentimes will do a video on how they discovered they were autistic. And so my parents had gotten an early autism diagnosis of me, but they hid it. I didn't know about it. I constantly got these envelopes from my grandma with March of Dimes all over it. And it seemed like no one in my mom's or my dad's family ever went to doctors. And a number of their brothers and sisters, and my grandparents' brothers and sisters, had been through the Great Depression. These were people that would hide their cash in mattresses. And I was born in 1956. So my mom discovered I was autistic. She was preparing for a career. She had a bachelor's and a master's degree in mathematics. My father had degrees in mathematics and engineering. And then he took a computer analyst job with IBM. But my mother didn't get to have a career because, according to her baby book, around the time I was in my late 2-year-old year and turning 3, I couldn't put phrases together. I could not put more than 2 words together. I could not pronounce several kinds of consonants, and I definitely had a delay in language. And I think that I would have been characterized as a borderline nonverbal autistic person. And they hid this because they were able to pass me off in the mainstream schools and entered me in kindergarten. And of course, when we went to school in the 1960s, there wasn't the big standardized testing or anything like that. And we oftentimes just got passed to the next grade. So I had spiky skills. My skills were widely divergent. For example, I was hyperlexic because I had an interest in the shapes of letters and numbers. That didn't mean I understood anything that I could read. But in 4th grade, they considered jumping me to 6th grade, but said they were not going to do it because I was socially nowhere near ready. I didn't have any friends. My father had to buy things to get kids at school or other neighborhood kids to come over to play with me because nobody wanted to be my friend. And I was always treated like I was odd and weird. And I was definitely exhibiting many autistic traits. So I grew up in the era of refrigerator mothers. And a woman labeled as a refrigerator mother would have had her entire career destroyed and might have ended up in a psychiatric hospital. And that, of course, was the fate of my Aunt Virginia, and she committed suicide because she was put in a psychiatric hospital. It scared my mother. My mother dropped all of her career advancement in mathematics and was working on a PhD in special education and psychology. At the time, she had to stop doing that and just take any old piecemeal job she could get because she was spending all of her time raising me. Now, I did not know I was autistic. I knew I had a hard time making friends. I knew I was very frequently bullied. I knew that I had a lot of special interests. I knew that everybody always told me I was odd and weird. I was very frequently called retard, the R word. And I didn't really think anything of it. My father kept pushing me that I had to go to college, that I had to be like him, that I had to have a job, that I had to do computers, and all this stuff that I realized that I couldn't do. But I did go to college, and I did something my father really, really hated. I went to law school. I went to law school because I made a friend when I was sitting as a computer monitor in the computer lab on college work study who was going to the law school. So he told me it was a great thing to do. And then two people I met at the horse shows who were lawyers told me it would be a fabulous thing to do to go to law school. And so I went to law school. And I didn't know anything about it, but I soon learned that all the rules and being able to systematize the rules was a very autistic thing. And I was able to script my way. But it wasn't easy for me. And I'll do a separate video on that. But I did graduate from law school in May of 1990. I graduated from the University of San Francisco School of Law at Kendrick Hall in May of 1990. And then I started the application process for bar admission to the State Bar of California. Now, initially, because I didn't know I was autistic at that time, and nobody told me I was autistic, and then not much was known about autism back then. I got a notice from the Committee of Bar Examiners of the State Bar of California approving my good moral character clearance and telling me that it would have to be periodically reviewed. And me a letter telling me that I had a good moral character before the State Bar of California outed me as being autistic. And so here I am, thinking I'm doing everything right and doing what all my other classmates were doing, applying to get my bar admission so I could get my attorney license and have some skill where someone would hire me as an autistic person so I could work. But then my father and my stepmother triggered my mother to commit suicide. And it was a huge fight over my being autistic. And in the middle of it, my mom pulled out her divorce papers and her marital settlement agreement that awarded me New York State adult child support against my father under the standard of I was incapacitated from being anticipated to ever be able to support myself by gainful work. And that's because they knew I was autistic. And my mom said, I am so sorry. Your father and I put this away and we never looked back. And then on July 12th, 1994, my mother committed suicide on my father's front lawn with civil rights, equal protection signs at the scene. And she died at around 5:13 the next morning. And she was my caregiver. So there I was, and I'm sure under the DSM-5, I would be classified at least as a level 2 autistic person as far as support needs. And there I was, and this had just happened to me, and I was in the middle of a bar admission process. So the local county paper picked up the story, and they sent reporters to my door. And then the San Francisco Chronicle picked up the story. And then the Committee of Bar Examiners of the State Bar of California must have seen the story, because they immediately revoked my good moral character clearance, and they created a process to stop me from getting my bar admission after 8 years of working and struggling very hard for that achievement, and having actually graduated from law school with a Juris Doctor degree. And so I filed for a hearing about that in the State Bar Court of the State Bar of California. And I got a deputy trial counsel, Andrea T. Wachter, and an attorney out of the general counsel's office of the State Bar of California, Patricia D. Scotland, who were assigned to me. And I kept being told that I was odd and weird, and there was something wrong with me, and they couldn't really put their finger on it. And the next thing you know, I was hit with emotion by the deputy trial counsel. On June 6, 1995, State Bar of California Hearing Department Judge Alan K. Goldhammer entered a ruling on the State Bar of California's motion for a physical and mental examination. And the hearing department judge, who was a former Social Security administrative law judge who had obviously seen autistic claimants before, entered that order. And the first thing I did was I had a horse business customer who was a psychiatrist. And I went to him and said, what do I do? And he wrote a report for me, but he mentions that I have peculiarities. So it was obvious to me that he knew I was autistic, but was trying to protect me from the stigma of such a diagnosis with the State Bar of California. And so then the second thing I did was I went to a psychologist. And this psychologist wrote a report saying that he has not heard anything about a social life, and that I don't seem to have any friends, and this kind of thing. More autistic traits. And then I got another psychiatrist, and she had neuropsychological testing done on me. And I was given a test to put together social stories, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't understand the social stories. I don't have a social brain. I'm autistic. I didn't know what order they would go in. I don't know what people are doing when they're making social movements and social cues and in their social culture. And he commented that someone with my level of education, that he can't figure out this anomaly of why I can't put social stories together. But that was only one shoe dropping. And the hearing department judge of the State Bar of California said that the deputy trial counsel got to choose the examining doctors. That's when the other shoe dropped, because that's when the deputy trial counsel of the State Bar of California, representing the Committee of Bar Examiners of the State Bar of California, outed me as being autistic. they immediately selected 2 experts to examine me, this being one of them, and his specialty was in psycholinguistics, developmental psychology, and English literature. Now, if you were not outing someone as being autistic, why would you choose that kind of specialty? And so, yeah, I was outed by the California State Bar Deputy Trial Counsel's Office, representing the Committee of Bar Examiners of the State Bar of California, as being autistic. And they gave pretextual reasons, but the real reason, underlying the reason, that they revoked my good moral character clearance and proceeded to use ableist neurotypical expectations and standards against me was because I am autistic. And that's how I discovered I was autistic. And, of course, that was in 1995. And so I'll do another video on it, but what they did as an outcome of this is I appealed their decision to the review department of the State Bar Court. For review by the review department of the State Bar Court from the hearing department decision where I was outed as being autistic, because, and I don't know if it was his decision alone, but the trial court administrator of the State Bar Court of the State Bar of California at that time was Scott Drexel. Scott Drexel, after what they did to me and the horrible autism discrimination I suffered at the hands of the State Bar of California and their State Bar Court, he skipped town and he moved to the Ohio State Bar. But nevertheless, what he did is I never got any appellate review, and he administratively closed my case. So because I'm autistic, I never got a hearing. Everyone else gets a hearing, but not me. I'm autistic. So then I kept trying to find a way to reopen it and get my appeal hearing. 2nd, 2003, I was informed by the clerk of the Supreme Court of the United States in my petition against California Chief Justice Ronald M. George et al. To try to direct the review department of the State Bar Court to move forward on my appeal of my bar admission case, that I did not have a final decision in my case, in that my case must first be reviewed by the highest state court in which a decision could be had. And this is how it has remained up until this date in 2024. And so there you have it. I not only got my appeal administratively closed because I'm autistic, so because I'm autistic, I was outed as being autistic, and being autistic resulted in my not getting my California bar admission. And when I asked for an appellate hearing in the State Bar Court of the State Bar of California, they administratively closed my case. And when I asked the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, who was then the Honorable Ronald M. George, for American with Disabilities Act accommodations I needed to be able to bring an extraordinary writ in the California Supreme Court of mandamus, asking them to direct the review department of the State Bar Court to give me my appeal hearing and my due process of law. And I had my witness here. I had my husband, or a couple other people around, and we could hear Honorable Chief Justice George's chambers clerk, perhaps his law clerk, talking, and him talking in the background. And he said, no, we're not going to license people like that. People like what? Autistic people? The State Bar of California is not going to license autistic people? That's what they said. That's what they said. Now, that was before Eric Weber. But it has been more than 30 years since I graduated from law school. I have been excluded from my California bar admission for over 30 years because I'm autistic. I'm autistic. They don't want any autistic people there. Well, I'll do another video on this. I know now of at least one other autistic person, a younger autistic person, who the California State Bar did admit to the bar in around 2015. But what you really have going on here is, if you want to put it into the storyline of the state of Florida, I'm California's Virgil Hawkins. And Eric Weber is Florida's James Hatchett. James Hatchett got his bar admission and got on to the Florida Supreme Court when Virgil Hawkins was still fighting to get his. But James Hatchett probably would not have gotten his bar admission in Florida without Virgil Hawkins paving the way. And so Virgil Hawkins ultimately got a remedy. He did ultimately get his bar admission because in Florida, the Supreme Court of Florida, the white justices were going to write that Virgil Hawkins had drapetomania, a psychiatric disability, or at least that's what they were referring to. But what they wrote is, in their draft opinions, according to articles I have read, is that Virgil Hawkins was not going to get his bar admission until he could turn white. Well, eventually, of course, when James Hatchett got on the court, he was going to air their dirty laundry about that. And they ultimately, the bar admission process ultimately gave Virgil Hawkins his bar admission. But it was so late in his life, he really never got the full benefit from everything that he had worked for. And in my case, it's been more than 30 years. I was outed by the State Bar of California as being autistic. I didn't know I was autistic at that time. My parents hid it from me. And it was a shock. It was a really big shock. And what was worse was it wasn't just being excluded from my bar admission. It was being illegally excluded from my bar admission by denying me the due process and equal protection right everyone else gets to have an appeal hearing. They wouldn't give me the CART real-time transcription that I've had in other courts than I require. They administratively closed my case. And then to hear, no, we're not going to license people like that from their former Chief Justice in the background, I was like, why? Why can't an autistic person be a lawyer? Or at least, why can't an autistic person be a lawyer in the state of California? It's now 34 years after I graduated from an ABA accredited law school, and I'm still waiting for an answer to that question. Anyway, thank you for watching my videos. If you want to hear more videos about being autistic and the courts and bar admissions and law school, as well as creating your own horse and pony business, hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified every time I put another video up. Thank you very much.